Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Chase Thomas Podcast, where I'm still the aforementioned Chase Thomas, coming to you live from Knoxville, Tennessee, up there in
New York City.
Jon Tayler of Fangraphs.com, a very good Major League Baseball website that you should go check out if you have not already. Subscribe today, Fangraphs.com. John.
Yes.
How are you, sir?
I am doing well. How about you?
Not too bad, not too bad. Do you, like, when you go through just the take graphs of the week here and to prepare each week, are you now bouncing ideas off the girlfriend? Is it in the Slack channel on Fangraphs? What's happening?
I usually just sit there and think to myself, what is the most outrageous thing I can say that I could at least 20% back up that doesn't involve the Oakland A's? Just because everything about the A's is just so kind of unbelievable at this point that it's it doesn't matter how accurate it is. It just sounds insane. Do you know they have an ERA of 8 on the season?
You can be talking about the A's, everything's ridiculous, where they're moving, what they're buying to tear down, what the products on the field is, what's happening in the press box. You could mean anything when saying, I can't believe the A's.
I like that their binding agreement apparently is not a binding agreement, and that they've also found a new agreement that is going to cost them even more than the old agreement. Everything is just going very well for the Oakland Athletics right now.
Good for them.
Good for her.
Her?
Must be funny or something.
I just hope that I think we have a pretty good Arrested Development listenership here. I feel like there's a lot of crossover between us and Arrested Development. But my wife still, God bless her, she watched season 4 a lot for some reason, and my brain doesn't retain anything past season 3 for AD, and she'll make these references, and she's like, "You have no idea what I'm talking about, do you?" And I'm like, "I have zero clue."
Look, I don't understand the point of having watched anything beyond season 3, so that's just me.
I just prefer it ended with, I fought the law. Oh no, hold on. No, I fought the law one, but then it was, what is it? Blah, blah, da, 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 da.
What, the blah, blah, law blog?
Yeah, but there was the other one, the judge, where you have Daniel Hung.
Oh, yeah.
What
Judge Reinhold and the William Hung jury.
Yeah. Hung trial with J. Reinhold. Hung trial with J. Reinhold.
Yeah, they really leaned into that one very
Judge
hard
Reinhold.
joke.
Maybe that was it.
Yeah, it was Judge Reinhold.
Judge Reinhold. Yeah. Hung trial with Judge Reinhold. Oh, it's a great jingle. It's a great jingle. Jon Tayler.
Yes.
It's time.
It is.
Your take of the week is what, sir?
Your AL MVP for 2023. I'm going to lean in and just say every syllable. Masataka Yoshida. The best hitter in baseball right now.
Can y'all just focus on beating the Braves once?
It's a 2-game series. What does it even matter? Also, you got to face Nick Pivetta. It barely counts. Look, I'm not going to lie. If you go back and listen to the episodes where we talk about the Red Sox, all 350,000 of them at this point, I'm sure that in talking about this offseason, Yoshida came up because he was pretty much the major offseason acquisition on Boston's part this season. And I'm sure that I was not terribly sanguine about his prospects. I think between his age, between the scouting comps that were coming out that basically made him sound like Andrew Benintendi, but less good at defense, between the contract,
the Red Sox moves to that point.
Yeah, just the fact that it was Chaim Bloom making the move.
Yes.
I had kind of figured, okay, maybe the best case scenario is this guy is like Brett Gardner with a little more power or something. Turns out, no, he's actually just Juan Soto, I guess. And I should, I'll preface, I'm already gonna just undermine the whole point of take graphs. Masataka Yoshida, who had a 16-game hit streak, and last night against Atlanta, who has a 146 WRC plus, was a 388 on base percentage, who has swung and missed once in the last 3 weeks. Not this good a hitter going forward. Probably not, no. But
I mean, his nickname is Macho Man, so are we sure?
He's very strong, and I think we should respect that.
I love that his nickname is Macho Man.
But I think what is noteworthy about him, and I think what makes him a player that I am increasingly just convinced is actually going to be an above average, at least hitter. I think defensively he's quite poor, and as a base runner, he doesn't really bring anything to the table. But just purely as a hitter, is to look at what he's done so far this season, and the particular and the unique way he's assembled it, because this is a guy who quite literally just doesn't strike out. You know, you look at his numbers. He has a swinging strike rate of 6.5%. That's it. That's like Luis Arraez levels of swinging strikes. Except that Yoshida also has an isolated power of about 205, which is basically peak Trout. Those numbers don't really belong together. And on top of that, he's running a walk rate around 10% too. He's got a walk rate of about 10%, a strikeout rate about 10%, an isolated power of about 200. Michael Bauman wrote a piece for us at Fangraphs today noting that that's the kind of production you used to see out of basically peak Albert Pujols. You know, out of Barry Bonds in his kind of sort of pre-steroidal prime. Those are real Vlad Senior numbers, you know? And I think it's funny when you look at the entire package with regards to Yoshida, it's kind of, if you squint, you can, I think, you know, thinking about it now, the player that Yoshida kind of reminds me a lot of is Vlad Senior in that way. And granted, I don't think he has quite the level of bat control that Vlad Senior does, but I don't think anyone alive has ever had quite the bat control Vlad Senior has. But you see something similar when you watch him take at bats, where he just does not, he really controls the strike zone, he really controls the bat, he does not swing and miss, he doesn't get fooled, he makes contact, he makes a ton of contact. Sometimes it's a lot of contact on the ground, and I think the other name that Michael mentioned in his Yoshida article that makes a lot of sense to me is Christian Yelich, who's kind of a similar ground ball oriented hitter at this point in time, but one with a good amount of power still. It's a really strange package, because hitters just like this don't really exist in the major leagues anymore. You know, or at the very least, if they not so much maybe don't exist, but it's like this is not common to see this kind of hitter where they walk a good amount, but they also don't strike out, but they also hit for power. Like, usually you lose one of those three things in the exchange, and the three true outcomes. One of those three kind of ends up dominating the other. Or you just have guys who are like, well, I don't mind striking out because that's, you know, I'm gripping and ripping the whole time, or what have you. So, you know, for Yoshida, it really is a special package of tools, I think. And again, not an all around great player. Again, the defense is not ideal, and the base running is not great. But I really do feel like this is a legitimately good hitter who is going to be part of that, maybe not the MVP conversation, because, you know, Shohei Ohtani does exist among Aaron Judge and others, but a guy who I think, you know, if you're looking at his numbers...
I don't know, Judge might miss too many games this year. We'll see.
That is a persistent potential issue with Monsieur Judge, but... I think it's something where if you're looking at the stats and you're looking at the kind of leader, you know, stat leaders around the league, and you're seeing Yoshida's name and you're going, well, what the heck? How? Like, this guy doesn't make any sense. Well, it does. Like, it's one of those things where I think the thing that blows my mind most about Masataka Yoshida, as you know, and as most of your listeners know, StatCast on the Baseball Savant has StatCast stats that include expected stats, which are, you know, just based on a whole variety of factors. But, you know, more or less, like, if you combine all these numbers, this is usually what you would end up with. So I want to run a couple numbers by you, and these are all as of through Monday, so not including Tuesday's game.
Okay. We could include it, though. John? What happened?
Yeah, but that would involve me doing math, and I don't feel like doing that.
But, like, what? Oh, that was the Braves.
I'm ignoring the setup. Like, I'm just letting it slide on past.
Best team in baseball.
Best team in baseball without, like, a functioning rotation. I know we're going back and forth here, but let me give you some Masataka Yoshida numbers, okay? 321 batting average, a 402 weighted on base average, a 536 slugging percentage, a 403 a 403 weighted on base average, 403 Wobacon, to use the whole convoluted acronym, which is basically what his weighted on base average is based on the quality of contact he makes. So again, 321 batting average, 402 weighted on base average, 536 slugging percentage, 403 Wobacon. And I just want to note first, the Woba and the Wobacon are essentially identical. You know, this guy is legitimately getting what he gets. But here's the fun one. Here are the expected stats. Expected batting average, 309. So he's 12 points off of that, or 12 points higher than that. Expected Woba, 406. That's a 4-point difference. Expected slugging percentage, 537, a 1-point difference. An expected Wobacon of 397, or a 6-point difference. Based on what StatCast is just seeing out of his output without looking at anything else, it thinks he should be hitting 309 with a 537 slugging percentage and a 406 WOBA. He's actually hitting 321 with a 536 slugging percentage and a 402 WOBA. That's incredible to me. Like, how often do you get guys who just line up that ideally, that just accurately with what the stats essentially tell you is supposed to be the case? That to me is an incredible thing. So I really have to say, like, there have been a lot of really cool hitting performances so far. You know, I can't discount. I'll throw some flowers on your Braves. You know, I can't discount how good Ronald Acuna looks. I can't Sean Murphy has apparently, I say gone back in time. Did you know Sean Murphy made his MLB debut in 2019? He hasn't even been in the league that long. And yet,
if you told me 2019 or like 2014, I would have believed you either way.
Exactly. Like, but either way, yeah. Sean Murphy, apparently the best hitting catcher in baseball.
He was actually in Moneyball.
He was it wasn't actually Jeremy Brown. It was Sean Murphy in disguise.
Yes.
Wander Franco has had a great start to the season. Bo Bichette, Marcus Semien, James Outman has been so good for the Dodgers, has been one of their lifesavers. Masataka Yoshida, though, maybe my favorite so far, just because of the sheer shape of his production, it really is unique. You know, yeah. There are no other hitters really like this in baseball right now, and I think that's just.
You're all in, John. Really You're glowing. This is just happy Jon Tayler because he went in. This is why keep your expectations low, folks. Because this man was like, we should just play the tapes. If just John.
It'd be really fun if you actually had them queued up right now.
I know all the Red Sox tapes, and John is just glowing about the Boston Red Sox in the early part of May here in this Major League Baseball season. He is so happy, and Yoshida's an awesome potential superstar. Like if Andrew Friedman called Heimblum right now and was like, what about Mookie Betts for Yoshida straight up? You know what you're doing? You're hanging up the phone.
I'm trading him for Mookie Betts. Like, what are we doing here? No, look, as long as we don't talk about the Red Sox pitching staff, all is good for me, you know?
Yeah. I mean, that's how I feel right now. Like the Braves.
Yeah, no.
This is why you just need so many freaking arms. This sport's just cruel. So many arms.
It really is. And like it's amazing how quickly it feels like every team. You know, we talked about the Yankees be like, oh, Garrett Cole and Carlos Rodon and Luis Severino and Frankie Montas and like 2 months later they don't have three of those guys, although Severino should be back soon. You know, we talk about the Braves and their rotation. They're down Kyle Wright and now they're probably out Max Fried until at least the All-Star break, which is just a brutal one for them. Obviously the saving grace there, and this I think would have been my backup take graph, that the NL East is a two-team race now between Atlanta and Philadelphia. Because I want to go ahead and bury the Mets. But I'm going to
bury the Mets? Hold on. Give me a minute on burying the Mets. Why are you tempted to bury the Mets right now,
Have you
John?
seen how they have been playing lately? And again, talking about teams where the rotations have fallen apart, Max Scherzer apparently is a sticky stuff abuser and also is hurt. Justin Verlander has made all of, I think, now 2 starts this season. You know, and now he's being counted on for a ton on top of that. Jose Quintana, hurt. David Peterson, bad, and also, I think, now hurt. That rotation is a real problem for them. And as I think we've kind of talked about, you know, when we talked about the Mets in the offseason, there's not, you know, the strategy they had, there was not a whole lot of available major league depth, or better said, I think, the rotation in particular, there was a lot they had to add to it because of what they lost in the process. Carlos Carrasco is the other pitcher I'm thinking of, who apparently will be back relatively soon, but still did not pitch well before going on the injured list, may have been hurt, but also not a guy I think who's going to be any level of difference maker at this point in his career. Like, I really worry about the Mets and how they're supposed to keep runs off the board, because the other problem with them is their bullpen is not good either.
Yeah.
And I think we knew that already at the start of the season was going to be a problem, particularly once they lost Edwin Diaz. You know, that was always going to be.
Yeah.
You know, I think if you'd asked us flash forward to the deadline, what are the Mets doing? I would have said, well, they're probably getting a reliever, at least one, probably two, maybe three.
Yeah.
Now you talk about what are the Mets going to do at the deadline, you're sitting there thinking, well, they definitely need a reliever. They probably need a starter. I could imagine they need a bat somewhere else in there too. Catchers kind of, there are some real issues with them that I don't really know how they solve them right now. Especially because they've already got Francisco Alvarez and Brett Baty up in the majors, you know?
Yeah.
There's not exactly another big top prospect kind of waiting down there in their system unless they want to call up Ronnie Mauricio to do I don't even know what exactly. But I'm worried about the Mets. I am genuinely worried, but I want to give them another week to see how things shake out. In particular, too, I want to see, because a lot of with the Mets right now, they've been playing some terrible teams and playing badly against those terrible teams, which I think is also another kind of really worrisome sign. Is they are playing down to the level of competition and also getting blown out of the water by that level of competition. So that's its own problem on its own.
Brett Baty looks like he's gonna be a player though.
He does look like he's gonna be a player, but I think here's an upcoming stretch for the Mets that I think is going to tell us a lot. So this week they are playing Cincinnati and then 4 games at Washington. That already on its own is going to tell us a lot. If they lose that series, I'm really, really out on the Mets. After that, 3 games against Tampa, 3 games against Cleveland, 3 games at Chicago, 3 games at Colorado, 3 games against Philadelphia, 3 games against Toronto, 3 games at Atlanta, 3 games at Pittsburgh, 2 games against the Yankees, 3 games against the Cardinals, 3 games at the Astros, 3 games at the Phillies, 4 games at the Brewers. I've basically gone all the way through June at this point. Point being, there are not a whole lot of pit stops in the upcoming month plus of the season for them. Even the ones that, even a team like Colorado where it's like, okay, the Rockies stink. Those are still 3 games at Coors.
Yeah.
The least fun place in the world for opposing teams to play baseball. And in between they have Phillies, a series against the Rays, the best team in baseball. The Phillies right behind or right above them in the division. The Braves obviously above them in the division. The Blue Jays who are great. The Pirates who are slumping, but still very clearly not a. I think the Pirates are neither as good as we've seen nor as bad as they've been recently. But regardless, a Subway Series that always just takes way too much oxygen and just ends up being a just anxiety-inducing mess for everyone involved. The Astros, the Phillies again. Like this was the easy portion of their season. The Mets have already had a lot of easy games. They've already played Oakland. They've played the Nationals 3 times. They'll play them 4 more. They already have 7 games against the Nationals out of the way. 3 games against the Rockies at home. 3 games against the Reds. 3 games against the Tigers. Like, they have not made hay in the portion of the schedule where they really needed to. They're 2 games below 500, and they don't really. And aside again from that series against the Nationals coming up this weekend and wrapping into the beginning of next week, they don't really get another easy opponent the rest of the way unless, you count either Colorado, which again, at Coors, or a 3-game series with St. Louis in about a month, which St. Louis is its own incredible problem right now. And by the way, I'm already going to start taking my victory lap on the Cardinals.
I was going to say,
not
John,
making the playoffs.
we have a whole Cardinals section here, but look, you nailed that. I think we need to get a Fangraphs writer into St. Louis sooner rather than later to ask about Jack Flaherty's fastball velocity.
Look, I don't know what's so complicated to understand about Jack Flaherty. Sometimes when he wants to, subtracts 8 miles an hour velocity off his fastball for reasons that should be patently obvious to everyone. What are those reasons? He does not need to explain them to you.
Yeah, you don't know ball.
You don't know ball, and Jack Flaherty knows that. But for me, it's like the Mets are really coming into the portion of this calendar now where they can't afford to keep playing like this because they're already how many games behind Atlanta are they right now? 9, 10?
Too many.
They are a lot of games behind Atlanta, and again, while Atlanta has its own
I say all
problems,
that, and I'm like, what were the Mets up on the Braves in June last year?
But while the Braves certainly have their own problems, like, you can't let that deficit keep growing. You have to start chipping away at it at some point, and I worry with the Mets that they don't really have the horses at the moment to do it. And a lot of this is just going to depend on, okay, can they get Scherzer back in some semblance of not just health, but also, his earlier form? Can the lineup beyond
They were up
Pete
10.5
Alonso,
games on June 1st.
Okay, so it's not impossible. And if you're a Mets fan, you're either somewhere between the season is over or the Braves did it to us. Why can't we do it to them?
Yeah,
but
the problem is the Braves just keep winning the division, and you're the Mets. Like, the Braves can do stuff like that. The Mets.
It's just you're putting yourself in a bad, obviously in a bad position. I think just to make that abundantly clear, we'll go to the tool that makes Fangraphs our playoff odds. That's not true. Plenty of other places have playoff odds, but ours are the best.
They are the best.
The Mets division winning odds are 4.5%. That's not what you want.
What's their playoff odds right now?
59.7%. So our playoff odds still feel pretty good about them being a wild card team. But keep in mind, I'll give you the preseason number too, just because I think that's the really important one here. Our preseason odds had the Mets as a 29.7% chance to win the division. Those odds, those already weren't great, and those odds have effectively been wiped out. Similarly, we had them at a 77% chance to make the playoffs. That's all the way down to that's already lost 20 points on its own too. They've already shaved off a lot of margin for error in just 6 weeks of baseball. They have a lot of ground that they need to make up. We have them now projected to win 89 to 90 games. Again, preseason projection, That's weird. It says 89 to 90 games, but whatever. It doesn't matter. Point of it all being, the Mets have hurt themselves with regards to, their postseason hopes, and I don't want to do the yogiism that it's getting late early. Sorry, their projected win total in the preseason was 90. Now it's down to 85.5. They've cut 4.5 wins off their projected win total. That's really, really bad.
Yeah.
Especially because the Braves are now projected to win 100 games. And I think, I don't know. I mean, again, like you just said, the Braves were down 10.5 in that division last year and came back to win it. I'm not going to say now for sure that the division is lost, but it's getting really close to that point. Yeah. And for as much as the wild card is not the worst thing in the world, there you're still competing with the Phillies, with the loser of Dodgers Padres, with the Diamondbacks, with potentially the Pirates, with potentially the Cubs or the Brewers, with potentially the Marlins. I mean, the NL picture is a little weaker, I think, than the AL picture is overall, but still, it's you don't want to put yourself in a position where your only way into the playoffs is the wild card. But right now, that looks like that's what the Mets have done to themselves already.
John, how would you explain to the folks who have not paid attention to what happened to the Pirates over the last 2 weeks? How would you explain what happened in their fall from grace here? Is it just injuries? Is it just the law of averages? What's happened?
I mean, I think there was bound to be some regression at some point, but I think also the simplest explanation is they've just stopped hitting. I'll give you here from May 1st through May 10th, which incorporates their most recent losing streak and slide. The Pirates are, they rank third to last in baseball in WRC plus at 53. As a team, they're hitting 179, 270, 276. Their batting average on balls in play is a mere 240, the second worst mark in baseball over that period of time. Only the Twins have been worse in that degree. Their strikeout rate, 26.1%. Again, only the Twins have been worse in that span of time. What has also happened with the Twins in the last week? I'm just now looking at this. What on earth? But
whoever wins the AL Central is going to have a losing record. I want that to be what happens here. I need them to be under 500. Whoever wins
I'd also like to note every team in the AL East has a better record than every team in the AL Central. If this year does not convince Major League Baseball that divisional format is simply no longer a functional thing, I don't know what's going to do it, because you have both central divisions have effectively stopped trying. Mm-hmm. And whatever.
I won't join you on this boat. I love some real sicko stuff of the Twins getting to host another playoff series against the Yankees in a wild card round and just getting ousted immediately.
One more stat on the Pirates. Home runs hit since May 30th. Or since May 1st. Number one in that category, the Atlanta Braves with 18.
It's what we do. Ks and HRs. That's what Atlanta does.
29th in that category, the Pittsburgh Pirates with 3. Only Cleveland has hit fewer, and Cleveland has hit 2.
Cleveland, I feel like over the last 7 years leads this.
Yeah, Cleveland. Ben Clemens wrote about Cleveland's offense for us this week and noted pretty convincingly that this is Cleveland. This is what you should expect from Cleveland's lineup. There is no power here. There's not a lot of strikeout. There's a lot of contact, but it's not exactly optimized contact.
And Cal Control's I'm doing what I can. What do you want me to do? Not come out and be awesome?
I mean, look, they're already making the right moves by doing things like demoting Zach Plesac, but regardless, the big problem the Pirates are into is they've just stopped hitting. And I think if you look at that lineup, I don't necessarily know that should come as a huge surprise. I mean, the big surprise was that lineup was hitting in the first place, because you're looking up and down and going, who the hell are most of these guys, I don't really, I should say, Brian Reynolds, I think, is obviously a legitimate hitter. Carlos Santana and Andrew McCutchen are venerated veterans with, lots of success in their past. Brian Hayes is a great pedigree, if nothing else. Connor Joe seems like a nice guy. But again, this is not a lineup.
Sucks.
Yeah, and this is, I think, where you start to feel the impact of O'Neal Cruz the most, because that was legitimately beyond Reynolds, the other guy in that lineup who you felt like could keep chugging along regardless, who had the sheer talent and the tools to end up an above average hitter even amidst the swoons and whatnot. The rest of this lineup is not really that. It's which is that's not to say Jack Sawinski and Connor Joe and Austin Hedges. Well, Austin Hedges is a bad hitter, but that's not to say that guys like Connor Joe and Jack Sawinski are without hope. But at the same time, that's not a lineup you're expecting to produce a ton of runs. So I think there has been some understandable and kind of predictable regression to the mean for some of those guys. The other part of it is that, again, this, as has always been the case with the Pirates, or seemingly feels like it's always been the case with the Pirates, when you're not spending money on the roster, when you're not bringing in, top tier free agents, when you're not, making trades to bring in those kind of impact players, when you are relying on guys like Sawinski and Ji-Hwan Bae and Santana, you do leave yourself more vulnerable to slumps like this because you don't really have those hitters. And again, this is where Cruz would have been so big. You don't really have those hitters to boost things. I mean, consider the fact that right now the Pirates are starting Chris Owings at shortstop. I legit thought he had retired 3 years ago. I had no idea Chris Owings was still in baseball, Mm-hmm. This, when you look at who the Pirates have used recently, it feels a lot more like, oh yeah, this is the Pirates we were expecting. Miguel Andujar, Chris Owings, Tucupita Marcano, like these are nowhere near impact hitters. These are guys you're throwing out there because you literally don't have anything else. And I think similarly, pitching-wise, it's a little different because guys like Johan Oviedo and Rancy Contreras, and especially Mitch Keller, who looks like he's taken a really big step forward, Pittsburgh wants to develop those guys. They're not going to, and I think understandably and reasonably so, they're not going to sign cheap veterans to pitch in those guys' place. They need these guys to develop because they need to know what they have in them. But I think similarly, when those guys start to struggle and there's really no backup options there, when you're just letting these young guys take their lumps, this is what you end up with, and some of that is, the bad luck of injury of like, say, Vince Velasquez being hurt, O'Neal Cruz obviously being hurt, Ji-Man Choi being hurt, not, because he is a very useful platoon bat there. Really, I think it really is just a matter, I think that Pittsburgh just doesn't really have the horses to keep hitting like that, or to keep hitting the way that they did. And are they going to be as bad an offensive team going forward? No, I don't think so. But at the same time, this wasn't a good offensive team last year. Do you know what I mean? Like this is not like the Yankees are in a slump and you're like, well, they're the Yankees. They're going to be better because look at all the guys who are in that roster. Again, just purely by WRC plus, last year the Pirates finished 28th in baseball with an 84 WRC plus. And for the most part, that lineup hasn't really changed all that much. There've been some shuffling at the margins, but the core of it is essentially the same. So, I think it sucks because I really, I think we were all enjoying the Pirates and what they were doing, the possibility that, hey, maybe there's, that maybe there's a little run here, maybe there's a little more than we expected. I think what we might be seeing is that this Pirates team, I think we're kind of getting that sense. I think what we're getting in this Pirates team is starting to see a little in advance what they might be going forward. Not just in terms of the guys they have now and how those guys are going to develop, like Sawinski and Bae, and now that they have Reynolds locked down long term and Cruz when he comes back healthy, but the guys who are in that farm system and who are going to step up and help them eventually, like Endy Rodriguez, like their number one pick from a couple years ago, whose name I'm already forgetting, and I really should not be forgetting, and I'm just kind of stalling for time while I look it up. Henry Davis, while they wait for Tamar Johnson, while they wait for, those guys are eventually going to be the guys who are going to make the biggest difference at the end, but we're not going to see those guys until next year, probably. Maybe we see Endy Rodriguez get a cup of coffee at some point in 2023, but otherwise, you're kind of waiting a little longer to see the kind of meat of the meat of Pittsburgh's system really start to come up and produce. And that includes the pitchers too. That includes that includes guys like Mike Burrows and Quinn Priester, who are both down in AAA right now. And I don't necessarily know, these are guys who, they've pitched a grand total of 30 innings in AAA right now. I don't imagine the Pirates are all that close to wanting to bring either of them up. But, I think what April represented for the Pirates is a sense of like, there's hope on the horizon. But yeah. I think it was probably a little premature to be like, the hope is here now.
I like that. That was a succinct way to end it. I like it. And
thanks.
You know what's better? You play in the NL Central. Look at the Orioles.
And that's,
the Orioles
and that's
making progress, and they're still just kind of screwed.
That's the other thing, is that the ceiling for the Pirates doesn't have to be that high, because as we've seen with the Central, nobody's really trying and nobody cares.
Yeah, so they could be a playoff team easily next year. Like, there's a clear path for them to really compete next year.
And I think even regardless of what happens, well, I mean, regardless of what happens, but, depending how the rest of the season goes, you can adjust that as needed. But like I said, I think April gives you the hope that, hey, this can actually be a playoff team relatively soon. Maybe not a playoff team with a super high ceiling, and maybe not a playoff team that ever really does more than, secure a wild card berth or maybe a surprise division berth, but at least a more competitive roster than we've seen out of Pittsburgh in the last 5 years or so.
Speaking of the NL Central, Jon Tayler.
Oh boy.
The Arizona Cardinals, also a train wreck. Everyone who's a Cardinal is basically.
I was gonna say, if you've named your team after the bird or the color, you're just screwed. Actually, is Stanford bad in any particular way right now?
I mean, in football, they're pretty terrible. They just fired their coach.
But like, were they good aside from the brief Ty Willingham stint?
Oh, in baseball, yeah. I mean, they're solid.
No, I mean
in
top
football. 25 team. Oh, I mean, yeah. Andrew Luck was there.
Oh, that's right. He was. See, this is what happens when a baseball guy
Jim
tries
Harbaugh
talking
era was pretty good, and then the early part of David Shaw was good, and then the last like 7, they were refusing to play the NIL game. And we played the NIL game.
I can understand why. They're the Ivy of the West, so they would not deign themselves to think of so low a prospect as paying a student athlete for their labor.
Yeah.
But yes, the Cardinals of the National League Central are an absolute dumpster fire.
I mean, we joked, like, take graphs, you saw it, but you don't want to go all the way out. And now they're the worst team in a division with a lot of bad teams, John. Mm-hmm. And I didn't see this coming. Like, this is...
No, I don't think anyone saw this coming. No.
I mean, where do you go here? Like, what happens? Does it get worse? Can they climb out? Who do you blame the most for this just completely imploding?
Apparently, all the blame belongs with Yadier Molina because he apparently was the only guy who knew how to do pitch preparation in St. Louis. I'll start with the Wilson Contreras stuff because I think it's most emblematic of just entirely what's gone wrong in St. Louis, which just seems like they have just decided that there's no point in trying. Let me say that better. What seems to have been the case in St. Louis, or what seems to be the case in St. Louis, is that everything has just kind of stagnated. You know, that there just seemed to be this kind of idea. It's like, oh, well, we're just going to have Yadier Molina and Adam Wainwright forever, and everything will be great. What I don't really understand is you had a year to prepare for Yadier Molina no longer being the catcher of the Cardinals because of his very, demonstrative, like, I'm retiring and I'm going away and you're not going to have Yadier Molina anymore. Like, this should not have caught the Cardinals by surprise that, to go into the whole Contreras thing, that the catcher they got to replace Yadier Molina is not Yadier Molina. And I think that's where, when I say stagnation, I think there's this there's this huge seemingly lack of imagination in St. Louis. There's this real lack of, of free thinking or of even new thinking. I don't understand why the expectation was that Wilson Contreras was just going to do what Yadier Molina did. They are obviously not the same player, but particularly not the same player when it comes to their defense. And that's not as much a knock on Contreras as it is kind of propping up Molina, but Contreras has never been a great defensive catcher. And the Cardinals had to know that when they signed him. It's not exactly like that was a secret. There are all kinds of numbers that will tell you that now. To say nothing of the fact that he has been playing for one of their division rivals for literally his entire career. All they had to do was literally watch a Cubs-Cardinals game one time, watch Contreras behind the plate and go, oh, okay, I guess, maybe that's not what we want. And look, I don't know what's going on behind the scenes. Maybe there's some weird culture or personality fit that's just not working out here with Contreras and the pitching staff. But it just fundamentally, to me, does not make sense that either the Cardinals thought that Contreras was just going to take over seamlessly from Molina and that everything was going to be the same. That just speaks to a total lack of foresight and planning. It also just says, it's also just insane to me that they looked at this pitching staff, which I think everyone before the season looked at and went, that's not a great pitching staff. Like, this is not a particularly impact group of guys. When Jordan Montgomery is your clear number one, can you really be surprised when they're not performing well? Like,
that being said, but they didn't think it was going to be this bad. Like, not well, but like average. Like, we thought they would.
Sure, and I expected average too. I expected
horrible. This is not average. This is like the season's over. Like, this is a clean house type situation now.
And this is what makes me think that ultimately the blame has to go to John Mozeliak and Ollie Marmol. Like, if you're Mozeliak, and this has been a common refrain of mine for the Cardinals for a bit now, but I don't know how you could go into the season with that rotation and feel like you had enough. And similarly, I don't understand in the least how you can look at Contreras and, one, make him the scapegoat, and two, decide that the best way to recoup his value is to put him at a position where he has to produce more in order to be better relative to the position, and you create a logjam where guys like Nolan Gorman no longer have easy playing time. How does this help you? How does it help you to get Andrew Knizner's bat, or Knizner, White Molina? How does it help you at all to get his bat in the lineup? He's not even a good defender. That's the other side of it. Like, what I think, why I just kind of zero in on Mozeliak is because these moves do not feel like they are being made by someone who is is thinking clearly, or who has like a plan of action for how to fix this. This feels like throwing everything you can against the wall, seeing what sticks, and then scraping off what sticks onto a plate and trying to serve it to people. Be like, what about this? Do you like this? How about this? Like, there does not seem to be anyone in charge right now, or at least the people who are in charge don't seem to have any ideas beyond, well, why don't we blame the catcher? And I think that extends to Marmol too. And I think you could get that sense when that whole dust up with Tyler O'Neill happened, where he got called out for not running all the way out to first base, which that happens. I mean, we saw it happen to something similar happen with Javi Baez, where he forgot how many outs there were, and AJ Hinch immediately pulled him, and that seemed to get Baez's head on a little straighter. But the way Marmol went about it, and I think the way that, O'Neill in particular seemed kind of upset that it was, why am I getting called out in the press over this? Why is this not an in-house discussion? That's worrisome to me, because that's the kind of thing, it's like, you can't be doing the stuff to piss off players like that and potentially lose a clubhouse like 3 days into the season. That does not speak well of Ollie Marmol's leadership capacity or capabilities. And neither does this Contreras stuff, honestly. You're the manager. This team is under your charge. I don't care if it's someone else's responsibility to get the pitchers ready, if it's someone else's responsibility to lead those meetings. You have to be the one to stand up and say, it's not good enough and that's my fault. You cannot be going out there and saying, actually, the catcher is the problem. We need to move the catcher. That is ducking responsibility in a really, really hard way. And I think that pretty well sums up to me what seems to be the problem in St. Louis, is that no one in charge seems either willing to be in charge or has the ideas necessary to be in charge. And it does kind of give you the feeling like this franchise does seem to have been kind of floating, in a sense. That there's not really been that step forward that other franchises have taken, at least with regards to optimizing the roster, with regards to getting the most out of your players. And granted, St. Louis has done really well with its player development, although I think there's some red flags there too in guys like Dylan Carlson, and the way that has kind of played out, in the way Tyler O'Neill has seemingly gone backwards, in the way that none of the pitching has really panned out. I think the way St. Louis, none of the homegrown pitching at least, some of that's been injury, but at the same time, like, nothing St. Louis is doing really seems to be working at this point. And while I think, you're right, we all expected average, I don't think anyone expected anything this bad, but it does seem to me like, if this is a franchise where it does, again, feel like no one's really in charge and everything is just kind of floating along aimlessly, this is exactly the kind of thing that can happen. That things can just go crashing down in an absolute hurry because there's no one behind the scenes to get things back in order and say, no, we're going to try this, we're going to do that. And for it not only to be, decisive, but also with some actual logic behind it. So I think that's really what's missing in St. Louis right now. I think, again, why ultimately just falls on Mozeliak and Marmol. I don't really see how either of them survives this season if this keeps going as it does. And I think it's really hard to argue that either of them should. Although, the one really funny thing about the Cardinals right now, so they are 13-24. They are 7.5 games out of first place in the Central. One, the fact that being 11 games under 500 only leaves you 7.5 games out of first place. Do you want to know what the Cardinals' odds of winning the NL Central are?
I'm going to say like 62%.
That'd be incredible. 17%.
Oh, wow. I just went full NL Central doubt. Like, just even with this horrible, horrible situation, I was going to be like still somewhere in the 50s.
Do you know what the 22-14 Rangers, who are actually leading the American League West, do you know what their division winning odds are?
20%.
31.3%. There's not a huge gap between those two, and yet the Rangers are 10 games better than the Cardinals in the standings overall. That's the NL Central, baby. You can be so far into last place that you can barely see the sun, be projected to finish below 500, and there is still a 1 in 5 chance you win the division with those numbers. It's really something.
Well, speaking of the Rangers, our two teams we're going to highlight here this week, Jon Tayler.
Okay.
One of them is the Seattle Mariners.
Okay.
Who are flirting with 500 here. They're not having the best season. Some guys are popping, some guys aren't. But when you mention the Rangers, and this is something that I think is important, and like a difference between the Mariners flirting with 500 and the Rangers having this bigger lead versus like the Mets being at 500 or below 500 in the NL East. Like, it's going to be a lot more difficult and arduous to make up that kind of ground in the Braves this summer. Like, it's just going to be a lot harder. What if you're around 500? Like, Mariners fans, just calm down. Like, just the area in the Northwest. hover around 500 for long enough, make some deadline deals, and you'll be right there to win the AL West, because the Houston Astros are having a season from hell. The injuries are piling up there. They're not running away with this division like that. I think
that's the thing. I don't think anyone is running away with this division. Even when and I know we'll talk about the Rangers, but in particular, you said with Houston, like I think things will get better for them once Altuve gets back. But the other side of things is now they're taking really big rotation hits. They're down Luis Garcia for the rest of the season and into next because he blew out his elbow. Jose Urquidy is going to be out for the next few months. You know, Urquidy particularly not a great starter, but again, those guys are depth. Those guys are above average pitchers. You're really testing your rotation depth now at a time when you are also really testing your lineup depth. You know, Houston's in for a tough one right now, it feels like, particularly when you include the fact that, you know, Alex Bregman is in a bad slump, although he should get out of it. Jose Abreu has really not been productive, and I think there are some really significant worries there with regards to, you know, whether or not he's capable of getting back up to his previous levels of production. It's going to be really interesting to see what Houston does here. I mean, the weird one now is that Michael Brantley was, you know, looked like he was about to be, you know, back from his injury rehab, and now has suddenly disappeared to the point where reporters asked Dusty Baker where Michael Brantley is, and he's like, I don't know.
Yeah.
You know, something weird is going on there, and who knows what it is, but Houston is not in an ideal position right now. You're right, and I don't think this is
that back and forth. By the way, if you don't know what we're talking about, Chandler Rome, beat writer from the program of The Athletic, outlined the back and forth there. What Dusty Baker, when he's like, so what's up with Brantley? He's not hitting. Okay, is he injured? No. And then you're just like, okay, then what? You're just like, okay, I'm just not getting an answer here. What are we talking about? What's happening?
Yeah, where it's just the weird secrecy about it is strange, but. I definitely agree with you that there's not a big Astros run coming. I don't feel like, and this is at the very least, this Astros team is not last year's Astros, is not the year before's Astros. You know, there's a market break here. I think that leaves the AL West more open than it's been in years at this point.
Yeah, and I mean, couldn't you still see a clear path for the Mariners to win this division?
Absolutely, I could see a clear path for any of the Angels, Rangers, or Mariners to win it if any of them can get hot enough for long enough a period of time. I mean, look at our playoff odds as they stand right now, and as of today, our division odds in the AL West: Houston 44%, Texas 31.3%, the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim 14.4%, and the Mariners 10.4%. I don't think I need to tell you what the A's are at, but. So our system still likes Houston the most, but consider too that, you know, that's those, you know, 44 to 31 is a decent sized gap, but by projected wins and losses, Houston's projected, we have them at 88 wins, Texas at 86, Angels at 83, the Mariners at 82. That's a really narrow band right there. And again, one hot streak is all it takes for one of those teams.
It's not just like a hot streak. It's just Julio Rodriguez being good again.
Yeah, that's it. That's as simple as it gets for the Mariners, you know. And I think, look, each of these teams definitely has problems to a certain degree. I think the Mariners have an offense that, even with Julio Rodriguez hitting well, has not really produced, and I think was a concern of theirs coming into the season that there just were not enough bats. That in particular at positions like second base, where
we joked about like really Jared Kelenic turning into a great hitter cost the. It's like, what did it cost for Jared Kelenic to figure it out?
It's a real monkey's paw scenario for every Mariners fan who's like, I just want Jared Kelenic to be good, and then the Julio Rodriguez finger curls down. But like, you know, and I think Texas has definite issues with the rotation with regards, especially with Jacob deGrom not really knowing if and when he's going to come back this season. The bullpen also, Will Smith and Jose Leclerc have both been awful. As the kind of co-closers to a certain degree. I have to imagine that if Texas stays in the race, they're going to be very aggressive going after bullpen help, because Bruce Bochy is not a guy who's just going to sit there and be like, I don't need relievers. No, Bruce Bochy needs his relievers. And the Angels are the Angels, and I don't really think I need to go into any more depth about that. But for each of them, there is definitely a path. I mean, Texas has a ridiculous lineup that is clicking on just every level right now. Third best WRC plus in the majors behind the Rays and the Braves. By the way, just a fun factoid interruption. What do you think the Rays WRC plus is right now?
The Rays, like team WRC plus right now?
Yes.
120?
143.
Ooh.
For just to give you a nice little comparison as to what a 143 WRC plus is means, that is the entire team hitting like Max Muncy. That's on a 1 through 9 of Bryce Harper right now.
There's going to be 2 teams in the AL East who missed the playoffs who are actually legitimately really good this year.
Yes. Yeah, and all because the Rays decided to have the best season in franchise history.
Yep.
I digress. Texas has a very good offense. Seattle has a good pitching staff led by Luis Castillo and a very good bullpen. The Angels have literally Shohei Ohtani. There are
But also
plenty...
look at the 3. You got to mention the 3, right? Like, the Mariners have a solid 3-man group. Like, come playoff time, you look at it, Castillo, Kirby, and Gilbert.
You feel good about that. That's probably the trio of those 3 AL West teams that you feel best about. Yeah. Again, depending on DeGrom's health. So I think there is very much a path for all 3 of them in the AL West. Yeah. I don't want to try to pick a favorite now because I think it really at the end is going to come down to injury luck. I think it really is going to come down to, for Houston, can they get Altuve back healthy, and can they find the pitching depth necessary to replace the guys they've lost? For Seattle, it's less about. For Seattle, I think the injury luck is more, can they stay healthy? That's a team where I think more so than any other AL West team aside from the Angels, if they lose a star or a starter, they're in really, really big trouble. And I think similarly for the Angels, the only path to an AL West title is a fully healthy Shohei Ohtani, a fully healthy Mike Trout, a fully healthy Anthony Rendon. I feel like everyone's got to be healthy because, again, that team has just never had the depth to be able to replace those guys. And with Texas, it's whether or not DeGrom comes back in one piece. And what can you get out of him going forward? Can you keep Corey Seager healthy on the field? It's funny we talk about DeGrom, especially given that rotation has plenty of other guys where you're like, are you really going to get more than 120 innings out of this guy? How? Andrew Haney, Nate Eovaldi, John Gray, none of these guys are the pictures of durability. Texas, I think, and I think we talked about this before the season, that for the Rangers, so much of this was going to be dependent on how much injury luck they could get with those guys. And so far, I think you had to pencil in losing DeGrom for some period of time in there. I don't think there was any realistic way he wasn't going to be down at some point. Mm-hmm. But if you're Texas, you're just holding your breath and hoping that this is not a Tommy John thing, that this is not a severe elbow injury.
Yeah, the Rangers are going to be the most interesting team this summer, I think, in the AL. Do they keep this together? Because if they do, the offensive firepower is fun. They're a team that I think a lot of folks do not want, they're just, I don't know. The Rangers are fascinating, but also
I think a Rangers playoff series would be every game would finish 12-8,
right?
I think fun.
If you're baseball, you want the Rangers in there.
Yeah, you want a Rangers Yankees series. That would just be throw it back to the late '90s. Get Pudge Rod out there to throw first pitch. Get Juan Gonzalez. Go on and dig up Rusty Greer. Make sure he doesn't hurt himself throwing a first pitch. I loved Rusty was a
was on that team.
Those late '90s Rangers, like Ken Hill and or I don't know if Ken Hill was on the late '90s Rangers. He was on the late '90s Angels.
Was Bartolo?
I guess was that? Yeah, I think so. At some point. Here, I'm just looking at the '98 Texas Rangers. You got Pudge Rod, you got Will Clark, Mark McLemore, Fernando Tatis Sr., Rusty Greer, Lee Stevens, big Lee Stevens guy over here, Rick Helling, Aaron Seeley, John Burkett, Darren Oliver back in his prime.
Darren Oliver is one. There you go.
This one just Bobby Witt Sr. Too many seniors now. I'm not really enjoying that. Mm-hmm. The weird one is going to be when we have to start referring. I guess I'm thankful that Andrew Jones's kid goes by Drew Jones because I was really not ready for Andrew Jones Sr. That was going to be a really hard one to swallow. Yeah. But the name Todd Van Poppel just jumped out at me, so I'm legally obligated to say it out loud. John Wetland.
John Wetland's another one.
But yeah, let's throw it back to that. Let's get rid of Yankees Twins. No one wants to see that anymore. We're done with Yankees Twins. Do it for Johnny Oates. Do it for Doug Melvin. Do it for Royce Clayton.
There you go. Last team here, John, as we wrap up. The Miami Marlins, who are right there around 500. They're okay.
Sure, yeah, why not?
Arias is good.
Yeah.
They're okay.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, look, the thing about the Marlins and what's going to keep me from thinking the Marlins' record in one-run games is 11-0.
That's sustainable.
Yes, exactly, and that's the thing. Which is not to say that just because of that, the Marlins aren't a good team, but it's their record is being propped up by something they have no control over that is completely unsustainable. And even if you could say, maybe they got a great bullpen, and that's what this is not a great bullpen that the Marlins have. This is not the Yankees of years previous. This is not the the Wade Davis, Greg Holland, Kelvin Herrera Royals. Like, this is an okay bullpen. This is not a team that should be 11-0 in one-run games for any reason other than they flipped a coin 11 times and got heads 11 times. You know what I mean? Like, and the problem again with the Marlins, as it just continues to be forever, they can't hit. They just cannot hit. You know, this is by WRC.
What is weird though is Jorge Soler's hitting again, which is good. 9 dingers already.
Good for him.
Jorge Soler's playing well.
But yeah, a WRC plus right now of 87, which ranks 24th in the majors. A weighted on base average of 297, which ranks 28th in the majors. A slugging percentage of 375, which ranks 24th in the majors. Like a walk rate of 6.6%. That is dead last in the major leagues. Like, this is not an offense that is built to do anything other than run into a solo home run every now and again, or maybe thanks to guys like Arraez or Jazz Chisholm, you know, scrape together a few extra base hits. And there's just not a good enough offense here for this team to be anything other, I think, than a borderline 500 team one way or the other. And, like, that's probably better than...
Is that enough to save everybody's jobs?
That's a good question. It's weird because on the one hand, I want to say no because, you know, a 500 team just really should never be enough in that regard, as if you're trying. But on the other hand, I don't know that the Marlins ownership cares at a certain point. I think the most important thing to Marlins ownership is, did you keep the payroll under $100 million? Yes? Okay. That is the most important thing that needs to happen in Miami. So I don't know. And I think some of that too is, you know, how is the farm system developing? I mean, we're going to see a really important piece of it soon with Yuri Perez, who's going to make his MLB debut this week against the Reds. He's their #1 prospect. He's an awesome pitcher. He's like 6'8". He's very cool. But I think, again, like the problem in Miami just continues to be they don't have offense. And then on top of that, when they do decide they want to go get offense, they do it by getting rid of a guy in Pablo Lopez, where it turns out maybe they should have kept Pablo Lopez. As good and look, the Lopez Arraez trade has been good for both sides.
I was going to say, I mean...
But the problem, I think, was that the Marlins didn't have the pitching depth that I think we all thought they did in order to make that deal work the way it should have. You know, and or they needed to do more than that. You know, there needed to be more than just Luis Arraez. It needed to be more than just hoping Jorge Soler would, you know, get a little better again. Like, there's just not enough being done, I think, to raise this team's ceiling meaningfully. And I think ultimately that's that. I mean, if I were in charge of the Marlins, that would be my problem, to be like, why is there not more being done here? But there's not more being done here because Marlins ownership, I think, just doesn't care to do all that much more. So I don't know if it's enough I don't know if that's going to cost K-Mang her job, but at the same time, it doesn't really seem like the solutions being sought are actually solutions here. You know, it's more just kind of, you know, again, in dealing Lopez to get Arraez, you're robbing Peter to pay Paul. Like, you need both. You have to have both. You can't just have one.
I also love the disparity between Luis Arraez and Jazz Chisholm, where it's like 34% K percentage for Jazz, and Luis is 6%, and has a 429 BABIP, 166 WRC plus. I mean, what would he have to do with the kind of player that he is? Like, just no power whatsoever, but just an absolute pain in the ass, and just you're assuming he's getting on base at least once, maybe twice every single game. Like, is there a way for him to maneuver his way into the NL MVP conversation?
Sure, he has to hit 400.
Okay.
Like, I think a guy like Arraez, because like you said, there's no power really coming from that bat. He's playing for a mediocre team in a mediocre lineup in a small market nobody's paying attention to. He's got to do something like hit close to 400 or something, I think. Which is not out of the realm of possibility. I mean, Luis Arraez is maybe the best bat-to-ball hitter in the majors right now. But that's, I think, the level that he needs to be at, because everything... And again, the other part, too, is there's no contribution on defense here. There's no contribution base running-wise. You know, it's all on the bat, and so he's really, you know, it really does have to be something like hitting close to 400.
There you go. Jon Tayler, that's all I've got. Your pick of the week for Fangraphs for the good folks who are going to go visit fangraphs.com after.
Yeah, and if you don't, I will...
What's your piece?
If you don't, I will come to your house and yell at you until you do.
There you go.
I will find out where you live. Mm-hmm. Okay, now it's starting to sound like a threat.
I think it began with the threat.
It began as a threat, and it just
was
kind
just
of
more intimidating. It was a more elaborate threat, yeah.
I'd like to highlight an ongoing series we're doing with our prospects. called Prospect Report 2023 Imminent Big Leaguers, where ordinarily at Fangraphs, we do our big team-by-team prospect list from our prospect dude, Eric Longenhagen, with a contribution from Tess Teruskin, our other prospect writer. This year, we're changing things up a bit to get the focus, while we put together those very long, very in-depth lists, to give people a focus on the guys who are getting closer to the majors and who might make an impact this year that you should know about. The most recent one we did was on the Cubs that came out on Tuesday. A very detailed breakdown of about a good solid 24 players in the Cubs system who are trending toward making a major league debut either this season or next. So we're talking about guys like Pete Crow Armstrong, Ben Brown, as well as guys who are already up like Hayden Wisniewski and Matt Mervis and Miguel Amaya. So, for Cubs fans, obviously go check that out and then go yell at us to tell us what we got wrong. For fans of all teams, as we're putting these together, come check it out, get a better sense of who's coming in the system. We'll have, all of these teams are going to get full prospect write-ups at some point, so you're going to learn more about the international signings, the recent draft picks, the hot shot teenagers. But this, I think, is an interesting way to get a different view of a farm system with still the same level of expert evaluation that Eric gives, but again, that's a little more focused on guys that, are going to be up a little sooner and that you might recognize a little sooner. So if you are a fan of a team like the Cubs, where you are in contention right now, this is as opposed to a team like, say, the Oakland A's, where contention is nowhere near the picture. Like, this is a way to get to know better the guys who might actually be coming up this summer, to start targeting those guys in advance. So I want to recommend that one. If you go check it out on our site, you'll see links to all the other ones we've done, both full lists and some of these imminent big leaguer ones. Definitely go check that out. Eric and Tess put a lot of work into their scouting, and it really shows when you read it. So that is my pick for this week's Fangraphs best piece to pick. Click the pick.
That was great. I love that. We don't call him Advertising John for nothing.
Wait, people call me that?
No, people don't call you that. That was good, though.
Okay, good.
Jon Tayler, always a pleasure. And I will talk to you next week.
Sounds good.
Well done, nephew. Chase Thomas Podcast. Hell yeah.